Welcome to the Paperless Productivity Podcast, where we give you the tips, tricks, and know-how to solve your biggest workflow challenges and bring greater productivity into your workplace every day. Government agencies are constantly tasked with doing more with less. Less money, less time, and fewer team members. But the information and services that you provide to your constituents is high in demand, and that can put you in a tight spot. We know you face quite a few daunting tasks in your daily work, but we also want you to know that there's hope. Today, we're here to share ways to meet requirements without losing your mind, and maybe even improve your workflow at the same time. So if you work in a government agency, this podcast episode is for you. Whether it's a small benefit like improving processes to help cut costs during bill time, or putting the technology in place for a larger project such as a searchable online public document repository, there's so many different ways to be able to leverage technology to benefit government agencies. Here today to shed some light on some of these benefits is Kevin Ledgister, Marketing Manager for ImageSoft. And since ImageSoft is a reseller of Hyland's OnBase solution, he'll be sharing 19 quick tips today for using OnBase to supercharge your agency's efficiency. Kevin, welcome to the show.
Hi, Trey. It's actually great to be back again talking to our audience about all the ways that they can increase their productivity by transitioning to a paperless process. I will say this, though. It's important to note that even though this is focused around what government agencies are doing, I think even if you're not in a government agency, maybe you're in an insurance environment or some other environment, and you're subscribing to a podcast or listening in, that you may find some of these tips that may be applicable to your organization as well. So I just want to make sure that everyone in the audience knows that they may find some golden nuggets in here as well.
Excellent. That's a good point. And before we dive in, I also wanted to make a note that all this information is going to be available in the show notes afterwards. So if you're not able to take notes right now, don't worry. We'll have everything available for you in the show notes afterwards. All right, Kevin, so let's go ahead and dive in and tell me, what are the top ways that government agencies can leverage a technology solution like OnBase?
Awesome. Well, I've got 19 of them because it's the year 2019. Mm-hmm. So I'm just going to run through these, and Kate, feel free to join in and add anything to that. So let's dive in. So the first one I'm going to talk about, number one, is audits. And it's not usually the most fun one that we like to talk about, but a detailed audit, if you have an OnBase system, is that you can have a detailed audit of the entire process, who touched the document, who looked at it, who accessed it, who processed it, emailed it, anything that you want to do. It just makes you so much more transparent for auditors when they need to take a look at how did something get processed, how was this actually handled, and it just reduces the burden on staff and employees in terms of having to track all those things and document everything. It just becomes a seamless way to do that. So that's number one, making your audits that much more easier and streamlined, and making outside auditors less intrusive in terms of interrupting your day. So that's number one.
Excellent.
Number two is to find information to serve your constituents faster. That's always one of the big challenges in a government agency is when constituents are calling in or emailing you and they're looking for information, being able to find that information quicker is so much better. If you think about any typical government agency, you have file cabinets of documents, you've got CAD drawings. If, for instance, if you're a county or a city, there's all kinds of invoices and different transactional emails that are stored in a million different places. And so responding back to your constituent oftentimes takes hours or days just to find all that information and to report back and say, hey, here's the status of where things are at, or here's the information that you're looking for, and being able to provide that. So being able to have one system where all that information is stored inside one single system, whether it's a project that you worked on for a building, whether it's an employee file, whether it's an invoice, whatever it's going to be, or land records, having that all inside one system makes it so much simpler and so much easier for you to respond quickly back to your constituent and provide that exceptional level of customer service.
Yeah, I would imagine that the expectations are growing from the constituent side that this is going to be easier to access, that they're going to get a faster response. So that's probably a pretty important one.
It is an important one, especially in the day of we're in a mobile age now, where a lot of government agencies are putting things up for people to interact with them from a mobile device. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, internally, they're not always prepared for the mobile world. So having a system like that can help them prepare for the mobile world and being that responsive just makes their lives so much easier.
That's a great point.
So number 3, not a fun one because we're talking about bill paying, but for a lot of cities and county and state agencies, being able to process and pay their bills faster and quicker and more accurately is so much more helpful, not just in terms of community relations, but also sometimes there may be discounts that a government agency can take advantage of by paying a bill early as opposed to paying it late, or you may even have service level agreements or policies within your department that says bills should be paid within X number of days, and being able to have that process just become much more controllable, being able to have those early payments, bubble up to the top quicker, makes it so much better for you. It conserves some of your budget, and it also makes just dealing with your vendors and your partners so much more of a better experience for them. So that's another one, just in terms of bringing all that under, that whole invoice accounts payable process under control. Is so much better for a government agency. So that is number 3. Number 4, think about all the millions of little tasks that you have that, you've got this high-powered computer sitting on your desk, and yet you're still doing a lot of these things manually, and there's no software application that you can go out and buy a solution for that takes care of those small pieces. So that's one of the advantages of having an OnBase system, is that a lot of those little tasks that are time-consuming, that might involve 10, 12 different steps that you would love to automate, in the days of the computer, that, we wish we could take 6 or 7 of those off of your plate and have the computer do those. Those are a lot of times of things that we identify with an OnBase that can take, that off of your load. So it frees you up to do things which are much more important and much more valuable in terms of what you bring to the table, and allows the OnBase system to use the configurable workflow piece of it to actually handle some of those other mundane tasks, repeatable tasks that you're doing, and have the system take care of it. So that's something that can make your day so much more peaceful, so much more satisfying, that you get to do more valuable work, and you're allowing the dream of having a computer do some of that mundane stuff that we've always wanted to get rid of but never could. Now you have a way to do that.
Yeah, I can imagine. It's a lot of those little tasks that end up, taking up such a big chunk of your day, and it makes it harder to get to the more meaningful work for the day. So that's great to know that you can automate those little tasks and have them off your back.
Yeah. So for instance, a very simple one might be just a notification of receipt, for instance, where let's say you're in HR and you want to just alert everybody that sends you a resume that you received their resume and it's being considered, and once it's been considered, to have an email that goes out that said, thank you for your time, but at this time, we're considering other candidates, or whatever that is. Mm-hmm. Just something simple as that, so that internally, if you click a button that says, I'm going to reject this application, or I'm going to table it for another time, the system can automatically send an email out for you. Such a huge time saver, mm-hmm. but such a big win that lets people know what's happening in your organization, where you don't actually have to type up that email and go into Outlook and type it up and, maybe find that one that you've got saved and recopy the template over. It just stores that template for you and just takes care of that. So that's just another way in terms of how you could free up by looking at a lot of those little tasks and automating those, so that you can focus more on, in the case of HR, for instance, looking at actual applicants and interviewing them and making those calls and setting up appointments, as opposed to sitting there typing out, endless number of emails. Or in some cases, some agencies don't even do that at all, and people get frustrated because they say, hey, I applied and I never heard back from them.
Never got a response.
And there's no response. And that could be for anything, not just HR. It could be any any particular process that you need to go through where you're dealing with people from the outside. It's just a way to have, seamless communication. So that's just one way in terms of using that configurable workflow to simplify many of those small tasks that, we just don't have systems for out there that you can just pop off the shelf OnBase provides you a tool in a way that you can do that fairly easily. So let's see, next one, number 5, and this is automatically linking your documents and content with your administrative systems. So for instance, if you're a government agency, whether you're in HR, whether you're in planning public works, maybe you have a county system that's just managing all of your data in there in terms of your accounting, in terms of land records, whatever it is that you're tracking in your systems. A lot of times you'll have that data that's in that system, and then the documents exist in the file cabinets or they're maybe scanned or stored on a file share somewhere, or maybe you have a basic document management system even storing documents in. And to find the related documents, you have to go in, open up another application, and do an actual manual search. So one of the things that OnBase does that can make your life so much easier, and we've got many codeless ways of doing this, where it doesn't actually touch your key administration systems, where you might be looking, for instance, up on in your administration system. For instance, you're looking up an invoice, and you double click on that invoice number, and up pops a window with that invoice. It's from OnBase, but the user doesn't even think about it or even realize it's from OnBase. It just feels like it's an extension of your administration system. Or it could be a project where it pulls up, for instance, the project documents that you may have that are associated with that, an Excel spreadsheet that are associated with a particular project. So whatever administration system you're using to manage your government agency's work, OnBase has a way to seamlessly tie the documents and content in OnBase with the data that you have in your administration system that makes for a seamless flow of presenting that information to you in a way that just makes sense, and it makes you able to make those decisions quicker, and you have better information. So you have better decisions and faster decisions by linking those two together. Number 6, just being able to track your physical records. That's another big thing. In some government agencies, there are laws that are in book that still require you to maintain paper copies of certain documents, and you can't get rid of those, but your office, it's hard to store some of those within your office space, and you have a warehouse somewhere, or you're storing them somewhere else, and you want to be able to just track those. And a lot of people have bought third-party systems that don't do very well, because now you've got your electronic documents in one system, and you've got your data in another system, and then you've got your physical data documents being tracked in another system, and the three aren't really talking to each other. So by being able to create entries into your OnBase system that tracks your physical documents and being able to check them in and check them out and who has them and where are they at, and being able to control that process. And if you do a search for documents, have those physical documents being listed alongside electronic documents can be a huge time saver. And it also makes you very aware and very responsive to any constituent requests in terms of having that information. So it's just another great way that you can manage the physical documents alongside with your electronic documents. And then when it comes time to retention or destroy those documents at some point in time, you also have a cohesive way of managing that as well. Number 7, think about all your council meetings and preparing the agenda. One of the great things about OnBase is that it has a whole agenda management platform within it, so that you can manage agendas for board meetings and council meetings, and it can record votes, and you can track the video along with that. And then also for the poor person that I feel sorry for, that has to do it manually today in terms of tracking all the agenda items and putting all the associated documentation together and creating those big agenda packets to hand over to the different council members is a huge challenge. And if there's a last minute change in the process, it can be very, very time consuming to handle that. So having an automated system that makes it easy to adjust not only the agenda in terms of which items appear first, but being able to add one last minute, add associated documents, and with a push of a button, be able to automatically generate those packets, huge time saver, makes the process so much more manageable, and it provides you a way eventually to share that out with the public as well who wants to see that, and maybe they want to go to a certain spot in the video when they're talking about an item of discussion that was on the agenda that they have an interest in. It makes it easy for them to jump around in the minutes video as well. So it totally can revolutionize your whole agenda management process from a government agency. So another way that OnBase can make your life so much better in 2019.
Yeah, I feel like, I'm sorry to jump in, but I think that this is one of those things. This is such a unique way of being able to use this system that I think a lot of agencies, government or not, don't really think about. When you have a larger organization like this, or like you said, something where you have to report out to the public, putting together an agenda and having people stay informed and everything. And sometimes there is a very important, that's why I laughed when you said about the last minute change, haven't helped them that, they have to, change something and add it in, and they've already made, at least dozens of copies, if not hundreds, depending on the size of, the audience that they may be expecting, or the size of the, city that they may be working with. That what a huge issue that could become, just one little change, but it's an important one. So I think this is a really one of those ways that people may not have thought of how to use technology to benefit their agency. It's a small thing, but what a difference it can make when you're frantically making copies before a 6 p.m. council meeting. That's I think that's a really interesting way of using that.
You're absolutely right, Kate. And if you think about it, because there are systems out there that does agenda management, and it's great, but the challenges you face is what about all the supporting documentation that has to go alongside the agenda item?
Absolutely.
Now you have to export those, or you have to call the people in public works, or you have to talk to people in finance. You have to pull all those documents together manually and attach it to that agenda item, either by scanning them in or managing hundreds of emails to make sure you get all the right attachments done, as opposed to if you're already storing that information to OnBase and constant OnBase, then you can pull that and attach it to those agenda items much easier, and it just becomes much more manageable and easier to control. So yeah, there's a huge boon to that, and you're right. It's an area that we often don't think about, but it's one that can have a big impact just in terms of making that agenda process much more easier to manage and even more transparent to the public.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So number 8, this is a fun one. Virtually every government agency has a ton of forms that are online. A lot of those forms are just in a basic PDF form that you can kind of fill out online, but you have to print them out and then mail them in, or walk them into the government office. Sometimes people will create like a HTML web form that you can fill certain things in. But the big challenge is what do you do with those forms that are state forms or official forms that you just can't change? And they're not designed to be processed electronically. You have to either fill them in online and print them out, or you print them out and fill them in with manually with pen and ink and mail those in. It's not very, very conducive to that process. So one of the great things about OnBase is that there's a new tool that allows you to take those PDF forms you really can't do anything with, and make those forms come alive, where data can be stored and merged with that form, and then submitted electronically. Or even if somebody has to print them out, at least now they're printed out in a format where it's machine print, where you can use tools within OnBase to automatically read that information and process it much more accurately. And so that's a huge boon. It's something that we're beginning to work with some of our customers on right now. We're thinking that this is going to be a huge boon for government agencies while we're in this transition period where we've moved from these fixed PDF forms into something more dynamic and electronic. This is a huge step in between that can help automate a lot of government agency processes. And almost every government agency, every government process starts with some form of a form, and a lot of them are PDF forms that have been created. And so this just gives you a whole new way to process those forms electronically and just simplify that process altogether. So a huge tool for you. And I think if you're listening and you're processing a lot of forms, you get 20, 30, 40, 50 forms on your website that you're just getting in via paper and they're all PDF forms. I just want to let you know that there is hope and there is light at the end of the tunnel, and there is a different and a better way that you can do this. All right. Number 9. This is a small one, but something that if you do this every day in terms of getting in emails where you need to store the actual email somewhere as part of a record because somebody made a commitment or a promise, inside it, or you need a record of that transaction, of that discussion in an email, or if you received an attachment, and today you're taking an attachment, either printing it off and scanning it in, or it's something that you have to, save the attachment to your desktop and then open up some other client and attach it to a document management system. OnBase has a way right within Outlook that you can save an email directly into OnBase, and also, or save the attachments. You can do either the email or attachment or both, or one or the other. And it's just a nice seamless way that you can store emails that have a record of a transaction or a record of a conversation along with the transaction, so that when somebody looks at this later on, they can see the email discussion that went along with it. They can see the attachments that are in there as a document, and that's all contained within OnBase. And it just makes it easier for you to go back and refer. And if somebody gets audited, or somebody comes back and says, well, hey, I never made that promise, or I never made that claim, that or made that assertion that they were going to actually perform X, Y, Z, you now have a record of it's done. Or if you sent something out saying, hey, this is something we're willing to do, or here's a record of what we said in terms of a final adjudication of a case, it's something that can also be thrown into the record easily along with OnBase as well. Much easier than trying to go back to an email backup and trying to search through everybody's emails in some sort of big, massive search. You now can just automatically store that as part of that transaction, as part of that record, and have that record of it. Especially if you're about to retire or you move on to another job, now there's that record in place that somebody can always go back and refer to and say, oh, so-and-so, when she was here, this is what she said. Here's a record of the conversation with a constituent. And now we have more data that we can go by, as opposed to somebody just taking, notes on the side and maybe have an incomplete set of notes. So great tool to have OnBase accessible within your Outlook client that makes it easier for you to get those emails and attachments that are important to store.
Now, I have to say that is a really important point, I think, because, with the turnover, right now that we're seeing, a lot of baby boomers retiring, and a lot of these people that have been in these agencies and in these organizations for a very long time. And now we're seeing massive waves of retirement. That's a really important point, because, it's that information transfer, that transfer of expertise that is making it, I think it could be really difficult if you're not able to have that transfer of information in person, being able to record all that information and have that available. That's a really powerful thing, and I think really important for what we're currently looking at right now.
It is. And, some agencies, and we see sometimes in the insurance industry, for instance, where when they're having a claims discussion, they want to record the conversation and store that in as well. So that, it's great. You can do that as well. But the other thing with that, along with the OnBase, and, we've seen this in our own experience, that, the average government agency is going to experience anywhere from 11% to 17% turnover a year. So some years you may have none, and other years you might see more. If there's election year, you tend to see a bigger number changeover, so that factors into it as well too. So there's always going to be, besides retirement, there's always just going to be turnover. And every time there's people turning over, there's always a loss of information, loss of content, loss of knowledge. And this is just one of the ways that you can help preserve some of that information and some of that knowledge and experience as to what happens. All right. So let's take a look at number 10. Number 10 is taking your plan review process electronic. And this is super, super, super important for government agencies, anyone that needs to manage the buildings and permitting and applications and looking at plans. OnBase can provide you a way to take that electronic now, where plans can be submitted to a portal electronically. It goes into a workflow queue where internal inspectors and engineers can take a look at those plans, mark up, make notes on those plans right within OnBase, and then updates the portal again automatically, and the outside contractors can grab a hold of those notes and the suggested revisions and take a look at those and send back revised plans. And one of the great things about the plan review process is that there's a tool in there that can automatically look at changes. So if somebody submits a plan that says, hey, we want to build this, the structure, on a spot of land, and you write back and say, oh, by the way, you don't have enough accessible parking spaces for the size of the building. And they come back and say, hey, we made that fix. But they may have made 5 or 6 other fixes as well and didn't tell you about it. This tool can actually automatically identify those changes and let you know visually, so you can see what those changes are and inspect those changes, so somebody doesn't try to slip something by you where you may not have noticed. So it's just great to have a tool like that, not only to make the going back and forth that happens with plans, and then be able to track the as-built, so it's part of your workflow process. You can request a final set of as-built plans. So sometimes things change during the middle of the construction process that nobody accounted for, and the city inspector comes along and says, oh, by the way, you need to make this change. We didn't catch this during the review initially, but now that now that we can see it visually constructed, your electrical panel needs to be moved over by 6 feet because it's too close to your furnace. Whatever it is, you need to have those changes being tracked, and then a final set of plans being submitted. So having that process from end to end to help you with that can just streamline the plan review process tremendously.
Now, that was a lot of good information, and we're only halfway through that list. So we hope you'll join us next time with part 2 of 19 ways that government agencies and others can benefit from using OnBase in 2019. Thanks again for joining us today for this episode of Paperless Productivity. This podcast is sponsored by ImageSoft, the paperless process people, which you can learn more about at ImageSoftInc.com. That's ImageSoftInc.com. Join us next time where you'll learn how to harness the power of technology, supercharge efficiency, and accomplish your organization's goals.